Good evening and welcome to the Fiscal Advisory Committee budget meeting. We will get going even though people are still heading in just because we have a pretty big agenda tonight. So tonight we are going to begin by taking a look at some of the updates we suggested last night, as you can see on our agenda, and then we'll move on to a couple of other things that I think people wanted to know more about, including the human resources and math and special education. So I'm going to pass it over to Jane, and she is going to talk about Pinkerton reductions and what we asked for last week.
Okay, thank you, Erica. As we know, we have the agenda in front of you. I just want to go over the handouts, and then we'll move on to the PowerPoint. A lot of these handouts are merely informational only. So the first handout that came in your packet that was paper clipped together behind your agenda is the one that says Health Trust. The first page was in your packet when we first made your budget books, but the other pages that I've attached in this handout are the actual plans that people in the district have. So at the top of the page, you'll see where I circled if they were for teachers, and you'll see on another page if I circled for all others. So the all others would be plans that are for anybody, and then the ones that say teachers are for teachers as well. And then there's one column where it's teachers only. And I went through and just linked the number of the plan to the number of the plan on the pages behind it. We just wanted you, the original document that was in your budget book were actually options of health insurance plans or add-ons, and they had not attached the actual plans that we use. So those were options, and we wanted to make sure that everybody in here had a copy of the actual plans that we offer to our employees. So that's number one. The second sheet is, we had been asked earlier today for actual versus budgeted, and we went back to 14-15. So, and we also broke it down by function code. Remember, function code is like a department. So 1100 would be general education, 1200 special education, so on and so forth. We did it by function code. You can see the first box there is all of 2014-15, and I will just look at that one just to give you an idea of how this is set up. All of the items are in the column by the function code, and it shows budgeted, the actual, and then what the difference from what we budgeted and what we spent, and the percentage difference from that. Now, keep in mind that when we do these, the actuals are what was actually spent as of June 30th. There are still costs associated with any given budget year that are spent after the end of the fiscal year because the bills have not come in yet, and those are booked as encumbrances. So those are not reflected in here, but just to give you an idea so that you could see where we were at budgeting and where we were of actual spent. Now, there's a lot of presumptions you can make each time you see it fluctuate, but if you look at particular years, particularly even the 1920, which is the last one that we did, because 2021 obviously is going to be such an outlier, but 1920 as well is an outlier because we used SPSRF funds to pay for many of the items in 1920 from March until June. We also negotiated our busing contract because, as you know, we were not running buses from March 13th on. So there was a lot of savings there. So there was quite a few areas that we had reductions or remaining balance in 1920. So really, to get a good idea, you more want to go 18, 19 and backwards. So this is, again, informational only. You can take a look at that at your leisure, and all of these are posted online, and we can send them electronically as well. The next document is a document for enrollment. And I know at the last budget meeting, people had asked questions because there are 6 classroom sections that are in the budget for adding another classroom. And the question was, can you show them what the class would look like if we did not add that class? So Bill did a really great job on all 5 of these charts. He did one for each school. And if you look at the first one, we'll just look at Derry Village, for example. First box is going to be by grade level. And then the next section says school board goal. And you'll see where it says strive. So the school board goal strive column is the school board goals for any grade level that's listed on the left-hand side, grades 1 through 5. And then the next column is projected, meaning what we're projecting for enrollment for next year, and then the difference, how many students would be left over. And that's where we had projected adding a classroom, which is the grade 3 in the yellow there. The question was, well, what if we don't add that class? What would the class numbers look like? So when you go to the next set of numbers, it says school board goal if no classes were added. Same strive to, and you can see what the numbers of students would be if we didn't add a classroom. So you would have 1 extra student in each classroom, that grade 3. If you go to the next column, Bill has it listed as the New Hampshire Code Administration for class size. So these are the New Hampshire strive to numbers per grade. So you can see the strive to for all of our grades. So grade 1, 2, 3 would be 20 students. Kindergarten 1, 2 would be 20, 3, 4, 5 would be 25, and you can see where our projected numbers lie. And then if you look at the last column, which is the maximum amount that the state would allow in classrooms, which is 25 for grades K1, 2, 30 for 3, 4, 5. So what he did is he took the classes, if you were to, in red is if you were to go by the state maximum class size, the ones in red are classes that you would be able to reduce out of your budget. These are not what we are recommending. I just want to make that clear. We are just showing you this for a paper exercise because people wanted to see what class sizes would look like. If you went to board goal, a little over board goal, state strive to, and state maximum. Okay, so that is the same way through each one of the schools, and you can take a look at those and you can see where the numbers lie for each one of the grade levels. Okay, and the last, second to last page is the revised November 8th, which is sort of our summary page that we do anytime we make changes. At the last meeting, the only 2 financial changes were to reduce Pinkerton by 30 students and reduce Pinkerton Special Ed by $450,000. Bill has highlighted this document in yellow, so it brings your attention right to where we made any changes. And then when you flip the document over, he has it all documented, so anytime you have a question on what changes were made to the cover sheet, he has it already documented on the back page for you and the date that it was done. As a note, the tax rate did come out, and the tax rate on this cover sheet is the actual approved tax rate that was just set last week, so it would be $14.82. And projected estimate on the budget with the 2 changes from Pinkerton enrollment would be $1.04. Okay. So, and then the last handout in your document that was in the paper-clipped one is for mathematics. So just hold that one aside for the moment, and I am going to flip now to the PowerPoint. And mathematics will be after that. Oh, next, I'm sorry. So in this PowerPoint, these are only items that changed from the prior meeting or things that are informational for you. I just mentioned that the board and fiscal advisory at the last meeting agreed to reduce Pinkerton students general ed by 30 students. You can see highlighted in the yellow, we've noted the 30 students, and the total reduction on the budget, which was over $400,000. And the next one is the 1200 function code, which is special ed for Pinkerton Academy. Excuse me. And what we did is went through and We just took 334,000 off of resource students. And when Laura, who is our interim director of student services, again went through the budget, she looked at the number of the ACT students, and instead of 16 for next year, she believes is going to be 13. So we reduced the ACT by 3 students, and so between those 2 reductions, which are both highlighted in yellow, those equal the 450,000 that was projected to be removed from Pinkerton Special Ed. Now, I do know that it says, under students, it says 16, and we kept that in there so that the math works out so that you can see the actual reduction. And then in the notes underneath on the same slide, we noted that it's 3 less from the 16. Okay? And since changing the Pinkerton numbers, it would change our pie chart of the overall budget, build it an updated chart so you could just see where the changes would be. And the next slide. Okay, these are, what he's going to do is continue this chart. So each of the next meetings, we will add another column. Every time we change something financially, we will put it in this chart. And as you can see, we have our budgeted column for November 1, and then the updated budget for November 8th for our meeting this evening. And you can see the difference from one over the other is a reduction of $877,377. And that's because we reduced the 30 students at Pinkerton and the 450 from Pinkerton Special Ed. There were no other changes to the budget outside of that. So the next slide, this just shows Pinkerton Academy, what the overall budget is for them. It would make the Pinkerton general ed tuition have a 0.4% increase over the prior year, and special education would still be a 13.54% increase. That bottom line, which is the yellow, is the total overall budget, including general fund, food service, and federal. Okay? And a reminder, because we're going to move on to human resources, but a reminder on those financials, Pinkerton Academy, hopefully we will have their budget, hopefully by the next board meeting, a budget meeting, if not by the next one after that. And of course, we'll make any adjustments at that point. So I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Kennedy, and she's going to talk about the part-time human resource assistant position that is in the budget. That's a new position.
Hello, everybody hear me? So what we were asked to do was to explain what this new role would be doing in our district, and what we're looking at is having this half-time or part-time person coordinate and track some mandatory trainings that we have that have been come down from RSAs. We have new hires, volunteers, contracted services, and substitutes, as well as employees that are already in place that have required trainings that they need to complete, either annually or biannually. And we're looking to have this person manage the training and making sure it's all done. We have 21 trainings based on RSAs. We have a website called Vector Solutions, which that person would enroll our employees and volunteers and substitutes in the system to be able to track these mandated trainings and to be able to provide those trainings. And we also have a Google Classroom for our contracted services that this person would be adding them into that for that training. We'd also have this person monitoring our recruitment efforts with posting ads and monitoring the closing of our postings. Right now, we have our district website, which is managed through Frontline, not managed through, but a program of Frontline. We use a School Spring website, EdJobs website, our school signs, websites, and newsletters, and as well as newspaper ads when we really want to get some information out. Can't read. So also this person would be, right now we have paper files, and we're looking to get all of our files scanned into our employee portal. And this person would work with our department to be able to get that done, as well as working as fingerprinting backup and photo ID backup for our employees and when they're hired. And then every spring, we have contracts that go out to meet timelines and stuff like that for our employees, and so they would help with that as well. The other handout you have is a document of our area towns and their staff in their Human Resources Department, along with the number of total employees that they have in there, so you can see that our district has just two of us in HR, and the others have quite a few to spread out the roles in that department. Are there any questions?
Kathy, thank you. I had requested this information, and this is a really nice, well laid out chart with the different towns and what they have. So I think it seems appropriate, especially since we're seeing some more costs from the state being sent down to us. So it looks like we'll have to cover those. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is this training new, or is this existing training? And if so, who's been handling the training tracking in the past?
So the ones that came down from RSAs are new. We do have some substitute trainings that we have on our website that they would do on their own. The substitutes would do on their own, but these trainings are new and required. Right now, we are managing them and tracking them. There's some overtime involved with that. We have quite a bit of tracking between substitutes, volunteers, employees, contracted services, to make sure that anybody that's working in our district has this training and it's getting done. One of our programs, the Vector Solutions, sends out emails and reminders to people, which we love, but the other one is not. The other trainings we have to keep following up with.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions about the HR position? If not, thank you very much, Kathy. That was very informative. That's exactly what I was looking for as well.
Thank you.
Next up, Laura.
All right. So in the PowerPoint, I kind of did an overview of special ed and both our elementary schools, middle schools, charter schools, and up at Pinkerton. So starting out with charter schools, we currently, and all of these numbers are based on numbers from today. Tomorrow they will be different. There's students in referral, there's new referrals coming in every day, students get discharged from special ed. So those numbers are ever evolving, so that's as of today. For special education and charter schools, one thing that I don't know whether there's an general understanding, but the services, students that go to charter schools are still the responsibility of the Derry Cooperative School District for special ed. So as charter schools open and students move there, our staff is charged with making sure they get their services. So some of the services that we're responsible for is the speech and language, the occupational therapy, physical therapy, counseling, paraprofessional, and also special ed teachers in each of those settings. We don't necessarily employ each of those positions, but the school will send bills to us. And I have a couple slides later, we outline what those cost. So, so I think that's something that's not necessarily very public, but that is a cost to the district.
Can you explain the physical and occupational therapy? Because those seem like medical conditions, not necessarily special ed conditions. So I just like to get an understanding of that.
Yeah, the occupational and physical therapies are really, as far as students being able to access their education, be able to utilize the tools. Could be handwriting for OT, it could be sensory diets that, students are doing different processes to help them regulate their body. PT, being able to access the building, be able to use the stairs in a building, to be, work on their core strength, to be able to be at a table and do things. So it's not, we try to keep a very clear line between the medical piece versus access to education. I don't know if that answers your question.
Kinda.
All right, so the next slide. I went through each of the charter schools that we have students in currently, and the cost associated with those from 2020, 2021. So it does, we have to work with contracted service providers to provide most of those services, based on the staff that's within our schools does not have the capacity to be able to travel out to schools around New Hampshire to provide those services. The next couple of slides goes through each of the schools, how many students are identified, the caseloads of the teachers that are working with those students, and the contracted service providers or district providers that are working within that school as well, and how many students they see. You'll notice that the OT and PT, those are they have smaller numbers in each of the schools. Most of those, we have one PT that works throughout the district and goes to all the schools, including Pinkerton. The OTs, they share schools as well. So there's not one assigned to each of the schools.
Laura, can I ask I don't know at which point you want to address this, but I was just wondering if you could address how the proposed special ed facilitator fits in to
Yep,
this
I'll get to that,
presentation.
yep. So going through each of the caseloads and the services and outlined what programs are in which school. I don't know if you want me to go through each of those individually. They pretty much all follow the same format. When we get to South Range and East Derry, those are the schools that currently share a facilitator. And as far as South Range being a smaller school, there's obviously smaller number of identified students. Combined, they're pretty similar to Barker, pretty similar to the middle schools as far as the one facilitator being able to manage those. The issue comes in with, it's really the traveling between the schools and the facilitator that's going between the two schools currently. She said it never fails that when she's at one school, the other school needs her. Whether there's a crisis with a student, parents are asking questions or, need to be available. Meetings, she can only do certain meetings on certain days in certain schools. That's not always feasible with parent schedules. So it's just really a division of resources that ends up causing a lot of delays. We had, a few years ago, had a facilitator in each of the buildings, and things went a lot smoother, and there was just more accessibility.
So the budget calls for 9 facilitators, but in this presentation, I only see like 5.
There's one in each of the elementary schools. That would be 5 with the new, with the proposed budget. There's one in each of the middle schools and one at Pinkerton, and one at the DEEP program.
Okay. So you have over, in K through 8, you have over 700 special ed students then, if I add these numbers up correctly?
I can give you an exact number as of today. Maybe not. I can give you an exact number when I get done with this,
Okay.
so I'm not holding things up. So going through each of the schools, are there any other questions about the K through 8? And does that answer your questions about the
So the one
facilitator?
question I have is, I certainly understand the complication of traveling in between, but given what you're telling me about numbers and that the biggest issue is the traveling in between, would it be feasible to say combine South Range and Derry Village, 2 schools that are much closer together, and cut down on some of the travel?
I think when you start looking at the numbers, there's, it does increase a little bit. It's something that can be looked at, but I think it's really more the accessibility to the teachers, to the admin, to the students, to the parents, and having that available equally across all the elementary schools.
And I do understand that. I guess I was asking so that we could consider what our options are, just because things are very tight. So I just was trying to understand the split between South Range and East Derry seems an interesting choice because
They were the
South
small,
Derry
I
is
think they
so
were the
far
smallest
apart.
schools at the time.
Okay.
Yep. So, in trying to, be fair as far as caseloads go. But the distance does, I agree, does make a difference. All right, so going on to Pinkerton, looking at each of the programs that they run, and the totals there. One thing, and I also listed the staff kind of associated with the special ed department there, that students have access to, and the office staff with the assistant directors, director, and administrative assistants that they have as well. Down below, or on the next slide, actually, I outlined each of the programs and kind of the services that are associated with those that are included in their tuition and included in the program cost. So each of the programs obviously has specialized instruction, some through smaller classes, some through a resource study. Speech and language is available on all of the programs. ACT has access to the autism specialist on campus, as well as resource has access to that as well. NECC being a specialized program, they have their own paraprofessionals, they have the BCBA, and they kind of run as their own entity. Services that the district, despite being at Pinkerton, that we provide up there are OT, PT, teacher of the deaf, that we have as contracted, as employees of the district, that we use those resources at Pinkerton. Then there's contracted services or additional charges that come with students' needs and making sure their IEPs are fulfilled. So not part of the program cost are the cost of the paraprofessionals. We have contracted services as far as nursing, orientation and mobility, teacher of the visually impaired, BCBAs, and I think that pretty much is there might be evaluations for assistive technology. There could be, there's like little outliers that are not a daily occurrence, but there are other additional charges as well. Then just looking at kind of a repeat of Jane's slides is, each of the programs, how many students we have in each program currently today. And again, when I was doing the numbers, there was probably, I would say 15 students in referral. I tried to take the referrals out of the mix, but those students may be identified, they may not. They're being evaluated currently. And then there's always students who leave special ed, whether they go on to high set, whether they do the ombudsman program. Typically, students that are doing their adult ed, they stay in special ed during their daytime portion of their program, and then they don't have supports in the evening program.
So so in this fiscal year, there's 259 kids in the resource program, and
Yes.
according to the budget, you're forecasting 332. That's a pretty hefty increase.
Yes, I would agree.
Do we know why there's
Those
such an
numbers,
increase?
I think those numbers were provided by Pinkerton as far as what their enrollment was, and then taking the 8th grade numbers and submitting those as well. So I would agree, I think, with the reduction that we've done this past week, I think that takes care of a lot of those, but that's, going into next year, it's taking into account the 8th graders that are currently enrolled with ours. One of the things, and I didn't do a slide on this, but looking at students that are at Pinkerton currently, so the graduating class of 2022 to 2025, there were probably 30% of the students that were identified that are already 1 year, adding 1 year onto their 4-year piece from special ed. So some of those numbers, they're not all going to graduate. Some of those students are going to be there as a 12 plus, and then we have the 8th graders coming in. So I think it's one of those numbers that I don't think it'll be an exact science. And I can put together a slide as far as the graduation rates and those kind of things, and as much information as I can get, if that helps. Looking at the contracted services up at K through 8 and also at Pinkerton, looking at the, what we pay in each of the categories as far as totals for all of the schools, and then totals for Pinkerton. These costs are based on the 18-19 full year. It was our last full year in school, where the contracted services didn't necessarily happen on remote, weren't necessarily available because they have to happen in person. Nursing was definitely down with students that were medically fragile not coming into programs. So kind of went back in time to the last full year we had. And so that's what things totaled up to in 18-19. I'm sure there's an increase. I know probably speech and language alone, where it's such a high demand in all the districts in the area, there has been an increase in what agencies are charging, because they were having trouble filling those spots themselves. And that's about, I don't know if anyone has any other questions.
Just to speak to Bruce's point before people ask questions, if you look at I just did quick math, if you took the extra that goes toward resources, not the regular tuition, assuming maybe there were no longer resources and they dropped to regular ed, the amount we cut, 450,000, would cut 50 students out of resources. It would be the equivalent of cutting 50 students out of resources, just so people can kind of see that mathematically, because I know it's kind of a hard thing to see. So it obviously doesn't get to that total number, but I don't know but that we can talk about that if need be. Derek, do you have a question?
Yeah, it's just on slide 23. I just want to make sure I'm reading this correctly. So the resource program and passes, we pay regular education tuition and then the program cost on top of that. But for ACT or ACT and NECC, it's more of a flat rate. We don't pay the regular tuition. Is that correct?
ACT, it's a flat rate as far as having access to their program, speech and language, smaller classrooms. They have the Work to Learn program for students that are transitioning to adulthood. That's a flat rate. And then there's the additional, if they need OT, PT, vision services, that's kind of all kind of a la carte, if you will. In resource, that's regular ed plus the resource program. So that's what that total is there. Passes, again, is regular tuition plus the cost of that program. And NECC is all-inclusive to their regular ed and special ed.
And the NEC looks like it's pretty much a pass-through from the cost from NECC. Is that right? Jane, do you know?
As far as when you say pass-through?
The 108,000, is that, because I know that they pretty much use all NECC
That's
staff.
all, yep, that's strictly NEC staff.
Okay,
Yep.
thank
and,
you.
And the students that are part of that program also have access to the general ed curriculum, and they go out to classes, it's supported. We have a few graduates coming up from that program that have gone through and earned their credits for their high school diploma, that they've had the credit, had the support to be able to access those classes.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions about special ed?
Actually, I do have one quick clarifying question. As far as the state is concerned, these students that are at Pinkerton are considered public school students because we're sending them, correct? Thank you.
Does anyone else have any special ed questions?
Does adding a halftime facilitator fix all of the needs that you would need in special education?
That's a loaded question. It would certainly help out, and it would help keep things more in check at both of those schools, where there's that delay of a day if the person's not in the building. or if the person can't get over to the other school. So sometimes that can kind of hold things up. What would really help with special ed is being able to fill all the positions we have open. So that's probably my big wish list.
How many unfilled positions do we have right now?
We have speech and language. We have a list. Thank you, HR. Assistant director, psychologist, licensed clinical therapist. We have 3 Title I math assistants, 3 Title I reading assistants, 2 elementary reading assistants, math reading, those are not special ed. 17 special ed assistants, an early childhood special ed teacher, 3 speech pathologists, 1 school psychologist, 4 NECC instructional tutors.
And are all those things included in next year's budget as though they will be filled?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just
those are
for-
not additional positions
So
that are being added.
this is just a
Those are-
really important thing for people to note. During the last couple of years, especially with COVID and with other things, for whatever, we've had a really hard time filling positions. So the budget number we're looking at now, one of the reasons we've had an unspent budget line by the end of the year is because we've been unable to fill positions. So those positions are moving into this next budget, but that doesn't actually mean, unfortunately, that we're going to spend that money, because if we can't find those people, we still won't spend that money. So that's just something people
Yeah.
should keep in mind.
And those costs, because we are still required to provide those to services to students, those costs end up going into contracted services through agencies, which, we're depending on people who do not work for the district to provide those services.
I got a question on that. So I work in long-term care, so when we use a lot of agency contracted services, we pay like 30 to 40% more higher than what you'd normally pay. Is that what you're experiencing, I assume?
Absolutely. Yep. I think I cringe every time I sign a contract right now.
Yeah. What avenues are you advertising for these? That's an astronomical amount of positions you're short.
Yes.
That's insane. I don't even know how you even run a program with that many positions short.
We are, as Kathy had mentioned earlier, we're doing School Spring, Ed Jobs New Hampshire, our listings on our website. I believe there's the Eagle Tribune, there's posting the boards at our school that are social media. So we're really looking at anything we can do to.
Do you have flexibility on like sign-on bonuses, that kind of thing? Is that
We do not.
No, right? Gotcha.
No. And just so I can complete the list of other positions that because I have airtime, custodians and a child nutrition cooks and servers are the other positions in the district.
You actually took my report for tomorrow night.
There you go.
I'll repeat those tomorrow night. We also have advertising through our school board meetings as well.
Just a point
People
on,
listen, and then sometimes they replay them. But we don't have sign-up bonuses. We've discussed that. We don't have them, though. It's a good question.
so just a point for people to keep in mind on that, because this recently came up next door in Londonderry. In Londonderry, they were also having a lot of trouble filling special ed positions for assistants specifically. And they actually, at their board meeting, voted to significantly raise what they would offer to pay those positions to try to recruit more positions, which most likely in turn hurts our efforts. So it's not, we are not the only one facing this issue. It's an issue that's much larger than us.
We've even had contracted agencies that are unable to even entertain, especially speech pathologists. We've even looked into doing virtual through .com, and they can't find therapists. So it's challenging right now.
Laura, are there also, penalties for not being able to provide services because we cannot fill these unfilled positions? It really becomes makeup services. I know that there's the East Derry has probably been hit the hardest as far as speech and language. So that's where we're putting, all of our resources and trying to do makeup services by having speech paths from other schools go over after school and provide services. We have contracted with one agency who is trying to give us as much as they can to, even if we're doubling up services during the week. So, we're doing the best we can to make up. If that takes us all year, everyone's keeping tallies and keeping track of, who has gotten what and who has missed any services so that we can make those up.
Thank you. And one other question or thought, I don't know. So I know we're using, or we have the opportunity to potentially use ESSER funds for general education, and I know we're doing like summer learning programs and things like that. Is that an avenue at which we can potentially use at our disposal, the ESSER 3 funds specifically, in the next coming years to potentially hire or come up with some creative ways to spend that money to help our special education staff?
I didn't know if Laura was going to answer this or if you want me to answer it. We
Go
have
ahead, Jane.
plenty of ESSER funds and nobody to fill positions to use ESSER funds, unfortunately. We're in a very lucky position to have as much ESSER funds as we do, and we have programs that are lined up to do additional learning for our students. We just don't have the staff applying. If there's no more on special ed, the next on the agenda is going to be the unfinished learning with Austin Garofalo and Lisa Long.
Okay. Hello, everyone. At last Monday's meeting, School Board Vice Chair Derek Anderson requested that our Director of Mathematics, Lisa Long, speak tonight about the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on unfinished learning in mathematics and the possible need for additional support. That is why we are giving this short presentation, and is also why everyone has received the one-page document entitled Presentation Unfinished Learning in Mathematics. So this is that one-pager with the little three-tier approach on the bottom. I want to thank our Director of Mathematics, Lisa Long, for being here tonight and for putting this together. It was her idea to put everything on one nice sheet of paper so you can have and see it all right there in front of you. So, to be completely transparent, provide full disclosure, Lisa and I talked about this. It's a bit uncomfortable and difficult for both of us to be advocating for hiring in the area of mathematics. At the same time, Bill and Jane put together their presentation that you saw, the one with the schools with the red and the yellow and so forth, about reducing the number of elementary classroom teachers by increasing class sizes. But at the end of this presentation, you will see that we do have a solution for this little dilemma, at least for now. So if you look on the back of the unfinished learning and math sheet, 2 years ago I developed a chart for a presentation comparing the number of Derry Cooperative School District teachers and assistants for reading support and the number of Derry Cooperative School District teachers and assistants for mathematics support. Now, I don't want anybody looking at this and saying something like, ooh, we have too many people teaching reading. That's not what we're looking at here by any means. This has not changed over the past 2 years. And as you can see, the data clearly shows a discrepancy, specifically in the need for more mathematics interventionists and our assistants. So I'm now going to turn this presentation over to our Director of Mathematics, Lisa Long. I will be back at the end to wrap things up.
Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Just to clarify one thing on the chart, it does not include some additional staff that we have through Title I. There is both additional reading assistants and additional math assistants through Title I that are not included on that because they're not at all schools. So you do have,
and they are specific to only working with
they have specific
Title I
exactly.
students.
They cannot work with all students per se. They have identified students that they work with. So I'd like to go through some information that I provided here and clarify where I can. Starting with a general overview, Over the last several years, we've had many discussions throughout the district that there is a need for additional staff to work directly with students who are struggling in math. As Dr. Garofalo mentioned, we do have a number of people who work with students who need additional support in reading. If a student is not identified in need of additional support through special education or Title I services, then any and all intervention needs are addressed by the classroom teacher in mathematics. With the effects of the pandemic, the need to support students who are struggling with mathematics has only increased. There are more students with unfinished learning, and the range of unfinished learning is wider. This is a trend in mathematics across our district, across the state, and across the nation. So to be a little more specific about the effects of the pandemic, here's a couple of points to consider or to think about. Point one, effective mathematics instruction depends on some key strategies that prove difficult to implement in a remote or hybrid model. These key strategies include using hands-on manipulatives, teacher modeling and demonstration, interactive math talk in collaboration with peers, and providing in-time, in-the-moment feedback and redirection during independent practice. We do use digital tools for math instruction, especially when we are implementing remote and hybrid models. However, for many students, these digital tools are not a sufficient substitute for in-person instruction, especially for an extended amount of time. Point number two, in my conversations with teachers, they are consistently reporting that since the pandemic, many more students at all grade levels are showing evidence of unfinished learning in the classroom as well as on assessments. Point number three, it's important that we address unfinished learning without creating even greater gaps in grade level achievement. The solution is more complicated than just teaching the previous year's standards. We have to prioritize our grade level learning targets while simultaneously filling in any unfinished learning that feed those learning targets. Point number four, in my conversations with educators, they consistently report that more students are struggling with some important skills like stamina, perseverance, motivation, independence, and collaboration since the pandemic. All of these skills are important for learning, practicing, applying, and extending math skills and concepts. So to get a little more specific, I thought I'd use an example of a grade 3 level. The last time our current third graders were in school for a full year of in-person learning was in kindergarten. Mathematics instruction for grades K through 2 focus on the foundational skills of counting, addition and subtraction, and beginning number sense. Grade 3 is a critical instructional year in math as students are transitioning from additive thinking to multiplicative thinking. Typically, this shift in mathematical thinking can be a difficult transition for many of our students. However, this year, we have more students in the third grade who need more practice and to solidify their foundational knowledge and skills. This will certainly affect their transition to multiplicative thinking. So what is our response to unfinished learning in 2021, 2022? We're looking at it in 3 tiers. We have curriculum, we have instruction, and we have targeted intervention. Through the curriculum, we've identified priority standards and fluency goals at each grade level. This will allow us to focus on the big ideas at each grade level and build foundations for future grade levels. For instruction, we're focusing on a goal to provide differentiated small group instruction and a workshop instruction model as much as possible. Teachers need time and flexibility to meet with small groups, and students need time and flexibility to practice, apply, and extend their thinking. The third layer is providing targeted instruction for various levels of unfinished learning. Teachers are doing this in the classroom with hands-on math activities, fluency practicing games, individual learning paths, and other activities. We're currently working on all these pieces to address unfinished learning. The one area in this graphic that is not in place is math-specific interventionists to provide additional targeted instruction. As Dr. Garofalo mentioned earlier, we do have a plan for that.
So, just quick, Lisa, math interventionists, what does that mean? What are they doing?
That means teachers or assistants, but I think our need is for certified teachers, but it could be assistants who work directly with students with additional work beyond the core curriculum, targeting unfinished learning to help them better access grade level expectations.
And are there any particular qualifications those kind of staff would need to be hired?
I think we would want to have teachers, we want to have them certified in education, elementary education at the minimum.
And,
Great if they were certified in math, but that would be difficult to find.
and Lisa has already put together a job description that we're working on. So with the support of our superintendent, Dr. Marianne Connors-Krikorian, and our business administrator, Jane Samad, we have talked about using ESSER funds to hire at least one certified teacher at each elementary school to work directly with students as math interventionists. So sort of getting back to what Derek was talking about and how we were feeling at the beginning of this when we're talking about potentially looking at things like reducing numbers and so forth. According to Jane, the ESSER funds go through the beginning, like I think you said September of 2024. So our hope is that when the ESSER funds are no longer available, which means we have them this year, hopefully we'll still have them for the 22-23 and the 23-24, which then, even though we'd have ESSER funds through like September, it wouldn't get us through the whole 24-25 school year. So our hope is that when the ESSER funds are no longer available, 3 budget cycles from now, I think it is, the members of the Fiscal Advisory Committee will be advising the school board members to fund these positions through the Derry Cooperative School District 2024-2025 budget.
Austin?
Yes.
Technically, where would those employees be in the union, out of the union, eventually in the union? Where would they fall in the pay, in the structure?
I would guess that they would be in the, right, Kathy?
Okay.
Yeah, they would be, we're hoping, as Lisa said, to get teacher level, at least initially, certified teachers, and when we can get a math certified teacher, that would definitely be the first choice. But there's a lot of people with elementary education that do a great job with teaching math as well. So, but yes, they would be teachers, and if we got some assistance, then they would be on the AFSCME union.
Does anyone else have other questions about this?
Austin, I just want to make sure I understand. You said one teacher per school. Is that the elementary schools, middle schools inclusive of as elementary as well as deep?
Well, we when we talked about this, the group of us, when we talked about the ESSER funds, we would love to at least get one to split at the middle school, but if there was enough funds, it would be great to, I mean, when you talk about middle school, and Lisa can talk to this even better than I, the fact that you have certified math subject teachers teaching math goes a long way. So first and foremost, we wanted to focus, depending on the monies and so forth, one for each elementary school would be our, and maybe we move, next year we get some more, or maybe we add assistants, we're not really sure, but elementary would be the number one, and if we can afford more, at least one for the middle level, because of course there are students that struggle in math there, and having that extra time to work on math would be beneficial.
And then another question I had, so if we have an interventionist at each school, are these teachers working with the the elementary school teachers, or are they working directly with students that are identified, that are maybe behind or struggling, or kind of what do we see that interventionists, how do they work?
They would be working directly with students, and we would come up with criteria of who those students would be. The target is potentially kids that are not identified in some other way but still struggle.
And then another question I have, so I see that this last bullet about important skills like stamina, perseverance, motivation, independence, and collaboration, those are obviously not specific to mathematics. So is that something that we would also see the interventionists working on with teachers to kind of throughout the school day, kind of help them with that?
Well, to be perfectly clear, the teachers are working on that right now every single day. In a sense that sometimes they have to work on that so much, they're not getting to the curriculum that they want to. So yes, it would be invade all parts.
And counselors are also working in that area. And just to stress that these interventionists are really to be working specifically with students.
Lisa, you mentioned that the target audience would not be special education students because they're theoretically getting that intervention through the special education process. Is that accurate to say?
Certainly don't want to say they would be excluded, but that's not necessarily the target audience.
Okay.
Through the years, we've struggled with the kids that aren't identified for anything and still struggle. That would be our target, but not to exclude any group, really.
Thank you.
Lisa, thank you and Austin for putting this together. It's interesting seeing this chart, the 32-to-1 ratio between reading and math, and obviously reading is important to understand math, so that's probably one reasoning behind that. Remembering back a few years ago, it took us, I think, 2 or 3 budget cycles to get year 1 math position in place, so I think it's a good idea to start now with federal funds are available, especially when it's in a great need to start this program. Do we have confidence that we'll be able to get 5 teachers for next year?
We have optimism.
Okay. I like that. That's all right. And then I think it's been probably since those 2 or 3 budget cycles that we would ask this, and that's comparators to around districts. So if other districts, I think both Salem and Londonderry have a lot of math support. It'd be interesting to see how that compares to us and other districts around us, just so we can put that into perspective.
Right, and I do want to emphasize that also goes to the coaching aspect, where a lot of, when you look at this chart on the back, you see Director of Mathematics, 1. And I tend to use the example of a town a little bit south of us a lot. I was there for 4 years myself prior to coming back to Derry, and along with their directors, they have 20 coaches, and there's other districts that are in the same, they're hiring more people so that they can have full-time coaches as well as have some teachers who do more of a part-time teaching as well as coaching. So some are full-time, some are part-time, but it's from the coaching aspect, and then it's when you look at interventionists and working directly with students, it's a big need, and this might be a way that we can get started. So thank you for bringing this up.
Another question. It's not really a question. So I know, I feel like, again, going back to the discrepancies between reading and math, and the resources that we apply to that. So I know there's summer reading programs, there's summer reading contests, there's all these things that both the district does, but also a lot of different, the New Hampshire Fisher Cats do different programs and things like that. Is there ways in which we can come up with creative things so that, I don't know if it's workbooks or some sort of competition in the summer, or, hey, getting parents involved, because I think I mean, I'm a big advocate. I think that's why I'm involved, is that the most successful students are generally going to be the ones that have parents that are involved in pushing them and being there for them. And we all say that if you read to your kid every day for 10 to 15 minutes per night, their ability to read is going to increase tenfold. So how do we, just as a community or as parents, continue to help push to make this easier for our kids and easier for our teachers as well?
I know the STEAM camp at Grinnell is extremely successful. That has great participation, and also extreme engagement from both students and parents, guardians, family members. So I think that's one model we really need to look at district-wide. That's just a concrete example of what you're talking about, Jonathan, to really interweave the other academic areas as well as the focus on math and science. So that is something that I have seen, and it's really flourishing over there. So that's something that we could look at district-wide as a primary example, and just certainly one, but certainly something that we could expand upon and take to another level. And it's, right in our own backyard.
And when we put the summer learning plan in two summers ago, which was the Edmentum, the focus was on literacy and mathematics. And again, this year's, where we were able to go in person and so forth, the focus again was on literacy and mathematics, as well as adding in the movement and the social emotional, hopefully working on those 5 areas that Lisa mentioned as far as the perseverance and so forth. And you're right about, I think about it even with my grandkids. It's a lot easier to pick up a book at night, and it's at their level and so forth. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to say, okay, we're going to do some math problems right before you fall asleep. But and Lisa would be the first one to say it. Reading is so important for everything we do, but it's not the be-all and end-all either.
I do agree there are certainly additional things we can do. One thing I was thinking of while you were talking was we do need to work on growth mindset, which would absolutely affect the positivity of kids and how they feel about math and learning in general. And any sort of connection we can make with parents in that realm would be everything positive. And I will continue to work on things like that.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think a lot of it is, I know, I feel comfortable doing math. I know my wife doesn't feel comfortable doing math, and so it's like this math doesn't translate as we get older necessarily, especially if we don't feel comfortable with it. Once you start reading and you start doing it right, it's the same thing over and over again. I know Charlotte's 5th grade teacher, Mr. McGowan, was really vital in talking about rote memorization and talking about things that's the stuff that's really going to improve kids as well, because it's times tables and it's things like flashcards that you can just do over and over and over again. So I'm wondering if there's any type of programs that we could do like that. I know back when I was in 2nd grade, we had competitions in 2nd grade. It was like, all right, who can do their 1s multiplications, 2s and 3s, and we go through that quickly. So I'm wondering, even just over the summer or through breaks and things like that, we have that same kind of competition that we have with reading. Just kind of some ideas.
Yes.
I know this is a budget meeting, but
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I also wonder, one of the things I know we have the PACE program, which separates out the people that are far ahead, but then everyone else is kind of clumped together in math. And I know in some other districts, what they do for math when it comes to that time of day is everyone in that grade is redistributed based on where they are in math and what they need. And that was obviously something that we couldn't discuss during COVID because we were trying to limit in cohorts. But now that we seem to optimistically be leaning towards getting away from, getting over that hump, that may be something to discuss for the future. The idea is, could we better address people's needs if we took the whole grade at math time and redistributed them so that the teacher could focus on where a particular group of kids are at? Because that's something that right now I sense may be a little more difficult given how we teach math. And that may or may not work, but it is something I know other districts do that once we don't have to worry about cohorting, I think would be a good discussion to have.
My general opinion is that you need a balance of both. that you do need time where it's whole class, and because they need to see and hear other people's mathematical thinking, and that needs to be part of the learning process. But that's kind of why we talk about interventions a lot, because that's when we divide kids into their need, and you kind of need both. And both can happen during a learning block if we restructure a little bit.
I know we talk a lot about literacy within the families, but there's numeracy issues as well. I know that within some learning communities, there's a lot of talk about sort of math in the wild. When you're making lunches and you have 3 kids and you need your bread, well, we need 2 slices of bread for every kid. Would there be a way to encourage parents that whenever they're thinking math, to discuss that with their children? Because that's a good way to see the importance of it and to also build that fluency.
Yeah, we were actually just, and that's a really good point, Erica. We were just able to hire, and this is part of my report tomorrow night too, so you're getting a preview of my report. But we were just able to hire a family engagement coordinator out of our ESSER funds part-time, between 15 and 25 hours a week. So certainly that's something that our family engagement coordinator can take on. The family engagement coordinator is just in the beginning of her role. So is looking, certainly for ideas and is open to ideas. So that is a position we were able to hire, again, a limited term position we were able to hire out of our ESSER funds to bring our district together and to focus on certain needs of unfinished learning and family engagement.
That's fantastic to hear. I have one other
Thoroughly,
question.
please. Thank you.
Yes. I have another question on the positions. If we can only keep or add 5 positions that we're looking at with the classrooms in order to manage the classroom size, would the students be more benefited by having these 5 positions in math in order to drill down on this learning loss and perhaps have somewhat larger class sizes? Or is there more priority to the class size?
Just to be clear, these potential math positions would not be funded by the district. They'd be funded fully by ESSER funds.
And
we
we
would
don't-
not pay for them at all.
And we don't need to budget them at all?
No, because these are positions that, for the next, we can access ESSER funds through the fall of 2024. So that's 3 potential budget cycles where catch-up funds, which Derek alluded to last week, are a specific area where you can access ESSER funds.
Okay.
It's similar to, there's a category for mental health that's similar. If you need additional counselors or things like that, you can access ESSER funds, which is not within our, so it's not, they're not competing with teachers. Some of these other positions recommended in the budget are that kind of discussion, but not the math. It's specifically ESSER funds.
There may be the competition for the actual staff, but not dollar-wise.
The competition to get the staff is a different matter, but the payment in this case would not be an issue. The rare case where that is not an issue.
Over the
And-
next 2 years, because what I heard is.
For the next 3 years, actually.
I heard that at some point you want them funded, but after the ESSER funds
That is-
run out, right?
Yes, certainly.
That's correct.
But we do have access to ESSER funds till the fall of 2024, so that's potentially 3 years to get a program off the ground.
Right, but I think Erica's question was, are they funded through the district? And they may not initially, but eventually you're going to ask that they are.
Yes, but for the next 3 years, they wouldn't have to be.
Correct. So what I think what I'm hearing is long-range planning.
And seeing if we needed to make any sort of commitment in order to actually hire these teachers.
Somebody else can speak probably clearer to this, but typically when we hire people through federal funds, it's a 1-year commitment.
Does anyone have questions about the unfinished learning in math for Lisa? Thank you, Lisa. That was a wonderful presentation, and Austin. If not, I did have a couple things about positions and things to think about, and then I would like to open the floor for other people's thoughts. So, Jessica and I spent some time thinking about things and looking through things, and I have a couple of potential suggestions because what I see us facing is 2 things. One, the numbers you see here aren't the only numbers budget voters will vote on, because we also will have 2 contracts, DEA and AFSCME. I can't speak to what those will be right now because we're in negotiations right now. But especially DEA is not a small number, so we do, as much as I would love to say I always want to budget and give kids the best we have. In reality, what we can give is the best we have with the funds we have. So in that light, looking through the budget, I found a couple things that where we could potentially save. We could hold off on replacing the 35 admin computers. They would be replaced if they broke, but that would save us $31,000. It is my belief that going all the way to state numbers for class size is not in our best interest, but I think there's 2 classrooms, one at South Range and one at East Derry, that we don't need to budget for next year. I think that's being a little too lenient with numbers given the budget we have, but I would replace that East Derry position given the challenges raised with with some kind of educational assistant. So the net savings on the computers would be 31, the net savings on the 2 teachers would be 150, and then I would like to open the floor for discussion of John's suggestion of could we get away with, while it may be great to have another full-time sped facilitator, could we use a half? Because if you add all those 3 things together, that would be $229,799, which isn't a huge number, but it is helpful. And then the last thing I would add is we have one class, a class at DVS that they're asking to keep, even though it's right on the border. And I would suggest instead of giving that number just to DVS, to give that teacher as a floater, so that if that class doesn't get as big as we think, we can move that teacher somewhere else. I see the value in having one floater based on need. So those would be my suggestions, but with that, and then to the question of Pinkerton and unspent funds, the number we're at now, I think it's probably a good place to stay, but once we know what the Pinkerton increase is, and we should know that at the next meeting, we might be able to have a different discussion. So if anyone wants to speak to any of the things I suggested or make suggestions of their own on priorities, this would be a good time to start that discussion. It is 7:45, so we don't want to go too much past 8.
So I have a question on this revised proposed budget. In the default column, you don't show any monies for special education, but on the original proposed budget, you did. So why the difference? Because the net result is a very low default budget.
Yep, I see what you're talking about, and that is an error. That number should not have changed from last time. That was an issue in my Excel that I was having earlier. If you look in the back, it also deleted the 1,100 total line as well. I did not notice that until just now.
Okay, so the default budget should really be 15 million higher than it shows right now.
Sorry, can you speak up? I couldn't hear you very clearly.
So the default budget and the revised proposed budget should be 15 million higher than it currently shows.
Bruce, I apologize. It's hard to hear down here. Are you referring to?
He wants to know
this
what the real number should be for the default budget.
For the default budget
For
for?
special education. Should be 15,986,032.90.
So it's that summary page, second line down under special education, 1,200 under default. We'll add that in and send out a revised one for you. Thank you, Bruce.
So the general problem I have right now is a tax increase of over $1. I really am struggling with that. Last year, the increase was well over $1, and the revaluation just brought it much below that, but the increase was still substantial. If you look over the last 4 years, our net district assessment's gone from 300,000 to 1.5 million to 2.9 million and now to 3.7 million. As this budget increases, the net district assessment's been increasing, and that's not sustainable. So I'd like to see that net district assessment get down so that the increase in the tax rate gets down.
Do you have a proposal of what we could do to get it lower?
No,
So the problem is, it's not that we're increasing costs, it's that we're losing revenue.
if you look at the revenue, we lost $1.4 million in revenue because of the, not because of a loss of revenue. We contributed less to the unfunded, unassigned fund balance. Last year, it was 4.4 million. This year, it's 3 million. That's a $1.4 million difference. You know, we've engaged in deficit spending the last few years because we kind of hide the increase in costs. When we did the one-time fiscal disparity aid, 1.5 million wasn't for one-time expenses. So, you know, at some point in time, we've got to rein it in a little bit, I think.
The question is, where do we cut to get there without severely impacting education?
I can't answer that question. I'm not an educator. I can't tell you where to take the money from.
I also think it's not just, it's very difficult to do that at 1 year, right? I mean, I think it's really,
Certainly.
it's beholden under the school board to kind of see the trend and try to plan for, plan to counter that. And maybe this study that's going on will help revamp the district, but I think the concern I have, along with Bruce, is if revenues are going down, you know, and costs are going up by substantially, and this doesn't include, I don't know, I mean, it's probably $150,000 per every percent for the teacher's contract. I didn't look at the assistants, but you know, that's on top of the 3.7 million. So I don't know what, you know, I know you're still negotiating, but it's 1%, 2%, 3% pay raise. You know, we're going to be, again, the district's net assessment will be back up to $4 million greater than it was last year, which will add more than $1 to the tax rate. So I guess I'm not sure. It's, you know, I don't know. I hear the conversations, and I'm not in a position to question whether we need a half an HR staff person. You know, I rely upon the administration to propose what they think is best. But I guess the thought is from the school board's perspective, you know, the school board, what is being done to reverse the trend? I guess what's the plan, and you know, and how do we get the budget aligned so that we're supporting that plan?
So I've now been on the school board for 6 years, and in my time on the school board, every year, the part of the budget we can control has a very small increase, and the part of the budget we can't control, Pinkerton or out of district spending or whatever it may be, will grow, and there's nothing we can do about that. I think right now, one of the biggest things we can do is look at our facilities and see if realigning our facilities realigns our needs and allows us to teach in a different way. Obviously, that's a long-term solution, thus facilities master planning. But in the short term, what we can do is look at what we've got and see what we need now, and see, like with the mathematics presentation tonight, what we can use ESSER funds for. Obviously, long-term, those programs we may want to continue, but for now, we can look at what can we use ESSER funds for to provide the education we need so that it's not on our dime, and then find a way to provide that in the future. A lot of the comparative towns we're looking at around us, Salem, Londonderry, they have equalized values that are almost twice the size as ours. So it's less that our budget size is a problem than the fact that the taxable income that's supporting us is a humongous problem because it's half of what other towns are. And we as a school board can do nothing about that. So that's a pretty grim assessment on my part, I admit, but that's why I tried to look through here and find what could we potentially live without to save whatever we can to dim the impact, knowing that even the discussions we have right now do not include the DEA or the AFSCME. And the AFSCME is small. It's really the DEA I'm talking about here. So I presented a total of about 229. If other people have thoughts on that or other suggestions of their own, I think it would be valuable to kind of put them out there.
In the past, we haven't been asked to make specific cuts. In the past, we've said, here's our target, and the school administrations come back with a list of recommendations of possibilities. So why this year are you looking for us to come up with specific cuts? A lot of us are not educators.
So,
Please
At the last meeting, John very clearly kind of went through what's happened in the past, what hasn't worked in the past. I don't even know how long I've been on this committee. At least 6 years, I'd say. And at the very beginning, it was horrible. It was, we traipsed people in here. We made them feel like we were going to fire them. There would be a whole crowd in the back. Everyone would be here to try to justify their job. It was pretty embarrassing, actually, for the district, as far as I'm concerned. And we really got to the point where they're putting out every possible piece of information we need. And I'm really impressed with what it's come to and all the information that's being provided. But like Erica said, it's really down to bare minimum, where we don't even know what to cut. And every year we sit up here and we say that Pinkerton's the problem, and health insurance, and so on and so forth. And to blatantly just say, go find $1 million and cut it, to me is a major insult to the people who do this on a daily basis. And I will say that every day because I watched it happen years ago, and it was embarrassing. So for me, if people have valid suggestions, I think it's great. But to go back to the days where we say, go find $1 million, and they come back with ludicrous things that nobody in the district is going to approve, is a waste of everyone's time and everyone involved. That's just my opinion.
So about 2 years ago, to speak to Noreen's point, we had a very difficult year where we asked the administration, show us what $1 million, $2 million, and $3 million of cuts would look like. In the end, we took, I think, a little less than 1 million because we looked at the 3 million and 2 million and were horrified about what it would mean for the district. So all that time spent to do that was, I don't think, well spent, because realistically, we only have so many options. So while hunting and pecking for $31,000 may not seem ideal, I did spend a couple hours doing it today because I thought whatever we can do to try to help and not hinder the learning, and on the flip side, use ESSER funds to fund what we can and find a way for that in the future, I think is the best game plan we have for now. Now, I certainly, there's a lot of smart people in this room with math and other background. I came up with a couple of suggestions myself. If other people had any, I would welcome those or to counter mine. And I should say mine and Jessica's because we talked about it a bit together. I don't want to not give her credit. But I do agree with Noreen and with John that the 1, 2, 3 million or percent, it's not going to hold any water because we still don't know the Pinkerton number. We still don't know what the DEA number is going to be, and a voter isn't going to look at just our budget. They're going to look at the DEA number as well. So I think we just need a different mindset to get us to where I was asking people last week. I didn't even ask people for what number is your target. What I really wanted to know is, what is your priority? What do you value most? And then maybe that can direct us in what we can live without if we have to live without something. And I know that's a big ask and a big question, but it's been something I spent a lot of time today looking at.
Erica, if I can add, I did meet with Jeremy Lamoth, our Director of Facilities, today to go over his budget as well, in case we did have to make some cuts. And we looked through, and there might be some areas in maintenance that we could either take out of this year's budget. For example, we have some drainage issues over at Gilbert H. Hood that really should be addressed now, that are in the budget for next year, things that we know that we could take out of this year. He has window replacements in there. Window replacements are an appropriate use of ESSER funds, so we can look at pulling those. So there were a few areas in maintenance that we could pull, and I'm not sure how much that will add up to, but it would be a little bit on the budget.
There we go. I knew it worked. I do. I know 31,000 doesn't seem like a lot, but I took the Chromebooks from next year and put them into ESSER funds so we wouldn't have to pay for them this year, thinking that, okay, we can get the admin computers this year when we're not paying the $250,000 for the Chromebooks, because next year I'm going to have to go back to putting those into the regular budget and the admin computers in there with it too. So I just want you to consider that there was a trade-off to put the admin computers into this year's budget in order that I wouldn't up the ante whenever they come back with the Chromebooks.
And I apologize, I had lost my thought on my last comment. I just want to let you know that I did reach out to the DOE and waiting to hear back clarification. My message to them was any of the positions that we are proposing, the facilitator, the 2 additional classrooms, would any of those be appropriate to use ESSER funds given class size and spacing and things like that? So I will get back to you with the answer from DOE as soon as I get that. And that may be another alternative use for funds to be able to reduce them out of this budget.
One area I'd like some help understanding is class sizes and our target relative to the state target and the state maximum. I'm curious how our target levels compare to other districts, especially those that are similar either in size or in property values, so that I can better understand how much we're setting a much higher standard for class sizes, or much smaller standard, I guess is right. And then looking for potentially the state to make up that difference when we're coming in far below the maximum projections and also coming below the strive. So just getting some context on those numbers would be helpful.
Jane, could you, I know that's a slide you produce all the time, the average comparing to different towns.
Yeah, I thought we'd put it in there, and Bill just reminded me that we didn't. Normally, we have the class size comparison, so we can certainly bring that for next board meeting, or we can send it out to the group tomorrow. That's something that we have readily available, those comparisons.
Thank you.
It's in, so it must be in here then.
I think
I
one
think the
thing to
district
consider-
overview presentation that's here in the budget book, Bill thinks that it's in there. Not sure what page in there.
Erica, if you go to the tab under presentations, and then you go to page 10, at the top, you'll see class size comparison.
The actual page 10, not the pages. Let me see.
Yeah, sorry, the page 10 within that presentation.
I see that, but I don't see how it compares to other districts. That's what I'm curious about.
It says class size comparison. It lists Manchester, Concord, Londonderry, Hudson.
We don't know what other schools' class size is, what their goals are. So this is from the state. We got this off the DOE website. So if we were to look at Londonderry, we don't know what their goals are. If they're in line with the state, if they're lower, if they are higher, or how they compare with us.
Thank you.
Sorry, I think I misunderstood your question.
So long-term, when we talk about long-term, and my comment now is obviously not geared towards this year due to all the staffing shortages that we're seeing, and so it's probably not something we want to encourage, but I noticed that we budget $300,000 for early retirement and those kind of things, and I'd just like to understand what kind of, what do we see on numbers on that? Is that something that we're seeing a good deal of? Are there restrictions that some people, maybe health insurance-wise, they got to stay longer than they would want to? Because that's an area, looking at it long-term, you can really flip the wage grid. You know, when you people making X dollars when they're 55, 60, and then you're hiring newer people at whatever age, 24, 25. I mean, long-term, that's something I would think we want to encourage. Obviously, right now, it's probably not possible, but it's just something that I noticed and was reading on, just looking at.
Jane, can you address that? Because that actually is something we actively do.
Kathy might be able to explain where people are on the wage scale right now, but I would say that if we do a wage scale to show where the number of our staff are. It is probably heavier to the right. Heavier to the right because, yeah.
You're going to flip that wage grid.
Right. On one hand, we're very lucky in Derry. We have very seasoned, experienced, well-educated educators, but we are heavy on the length of experience. So, but I don't know if Kathy may have that from doing negotiations. I'm not sure, but we could get that chart too for the next board meeting.
David, part of the math on that is that we budget 300,000 for retirees, and that's to pay out. When you retire, you get a 50% benefit or so, 45. And on the flip side, the reason we can budget a lower number is because each person we replace for the retiree is going to be much lower on the
I'm
pay
saying
scale.
I'm saying that's a good thing.
So we save.
No, I'm saying that's a great thing. We should encourage more of it. We should have a bigger number in that line item.
And occasionally we have encouraged
Oh, I'm
them.
trying to say. I mean, I guess the only other thing I was going back and forth on is when you look at the revenue section for federal grants, we're pretty flat at $1.3 million for the last 3 years. I didn't know if there are opportunities that we're not taking. I know we do a great job of getting grants. I say all the time in board meetings. Is there more opportunities that we're missing when we don't have the resources? Is there something that, going back to hiring, can't find anybody, but, it's something to think about. If we find a contract position or whatever, 20 hours a week, and they find a couple $100,000 a year, I don't know, just something to think about. As you look at that, from a revenue opportunity perspective. Because the response I got, it sounds like we may not be applying for everything we can based on resources that we have. If we need more resources, I mean, that seems like an area where it will pay for itself.
And the food service and federal that I put in there those are really averages that we have spent over the years. I can use actual numbers for federal and food service. They don't affect the tax rate because you only can spend what you get for a grant. And I think we've done a pretty good job of accessing some grants. The Homeland Security grant was about $1 million. We have Kim Conant working on our federal projects. We try to reach out and get as many. We're working on a grant right now to pay for the water project at East Derry. But I'm sure there are grants that we don't always get just because we don't have the staffing resources to always apply and manage those grants. But I can give an actual number of, same thing, I can do the last 10 years, 5 years of what we've actually received for federal funds for both federal and food service to make that more accurate.
So we're a little past 8, and we try to keep roughly to schedule. Does anyone else have anything they want to add tonight?
So can we just get an actual agenda and understanding for the next meeting? And I guess I'm leaning more towards having this open discussion at the next meeting instead of at 8 o'clock tonight. And if you could possibly email us what you said as far as your changes, because I couldn't really keep up exactly with what you said, just to compare against what you said. And hopefully by next meeting, we'll have Pinkerton, right?
That is the hope.
So I think we'll be in a much more accurate state by then. And just have open discussion, but I don't know, unless there's something else people want to specifically see.
So unless anybody wants a specific presentation from a specific department, we can do the agenda as open discussion. And if people have questions that they want clarification on any of the presentations this evening or things that may come up, please don't forget the best way to get your questions answered is to email Patty so that Patty can put them in the portal and we can get the answers out, because everybody would have access to the portal, and get the answers out to everybody. And maybe that would save a little time so that the whole meeting next time can be open discussion. And we'll send out as many documents ahead of time as we can. Thanks.
Does anyone else have any final comments? If not,
As far as the agenda, just instead of just having it as open discussion, like the first part could be administration's updated budget. So if you're going to find maintenance money to remove, then we can start with that. And Pinkerton, obviously, it'd be nice if we could get this proposed budget sheet, the update, with Pinkerton on it before the next meeting, even if it's one day before. But I don't know when they're going to get it to us, if it's possible. You know, if we can, that's great, because then we can walk in tonight or into this building that night and have the bottom line ready to go. And then we can turn it to open discussion and start to go through the other types.
Sure, yep, we can definitely do that. Anytime we're going to have a financial change, I would bring that document back and update it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have anything else? If not, I will adjourn the meeting and thank everyone for their time tonight.